Hey everyone, I am the Twitter guy. I do have slides, you just have to bear with me. I didn't get happy, but I got my slides, so that's something. Anyway, first of all, thank you for all joining. There's a queue of people still coming in, this worries me slightly. So I want to speak very slowly and make sure I don't have any questions at the end. So, all things being well. Oh, let me go back. Oh, the animation's not there. Okay, so give you some background of what I do. So my name is Sanjeet Matharu. My handle is @SanjM. And what I typically do is look after what we call the ecosystem. And what I mean by the ecosystem is that there are companies out there who use Twitter data in interesting ways, or there are companies who are thinking about using Twitter data in interesting ways. And my role is very much around finding these companies that make these things happen and making sure that we can support them and nurture them and guide them and also tell them to do things and tell them not to do things. It just depends on what we're after at this stage. And typically, what I'm going to run through today is going to be running through just the kind of thing that we tend to focus on, some examples of some of the companies that we've seen across multiple different markets, and then giving you some pointers into where you get started with all of this as well. But in order to provide some context, the first question that I like to put up there is, what is Twitter to a lot of people? Now, I've only got 9 minutes 13 left, so I'm not going to sit here and try and explain it to you. But ultimately, this is one way to describe it. Right? So Twitter is the shortest distance between you, your @handle, and what interests you most. So that's your categorization, that's your hashtag. These are effectively becoming anchors into all the data that's out there. And I'll talk about all the data that's out there in a few slides. But ultimately, this is one way to understand what is important to you and other people around you. So we're all on Twitter, I hope. And we're in a position where we have this ton of data that's out there. And how do we realize what's important and what's not? Talking about the ton of data that we have, we've got 271 million users at the moment. And we're doing around 1 billion tweets every 2 days. Now, Jack Dorsey, when he started up on Twitter in 2006, well, that was the first tweet that he ever sent out, right? In 2009, we had our 1,000,000th tweet, and now we're getting that every 2 days. Think about that in terms of the volume. That's a lot of data that's going out there at the moment. The other interesting point, 77% of users are outside of the US. And what that means to you, from a startup perspective, is that there's a whole stack of data that a lot of people aren't tapping into at the moment, especially from a local market perspective. We're sitting here in beautiful Istanbul, and I can pretty much guarantee there's a very small hub of companies who are analyzing the data that is specific and local to people in Turkey and the region beyond. The pulse of the planet. What does this mean? So I've talked about the volume of data that we have coming through on a regular basis. And ultimately, you'll be in a position to get to a stage of understanding what happens on a macro scale or what happens on a smaller scale from a personal perspective. And again, this data is all accessible. It's just a matter of being able to tap into it and understand it and making sure it works for you and helping you to enhance your products as you develop them. We'll go from some of the big ones here, right? So the World Cup 2014. Obviously, Germany won the World Cup. There's Lucas Podolski. If you notice my Twitter stream, there's a lot of football in there. I apologize, especially unless you're a Liverpool fan. But generally speaking, there's a lot of tweets around there around this World Cup. Any guesses at how many tweets we had over the entire tournament? So how many? Not that many. Close. 672 million. That's a lot of data that's there for you to understand, whether you're a brand, whether you're a media partner, you're in a position to actually understand what people are talking about. The conversations are really, really paramount here. 35.5 million tweets were sent during Brazil versus Germany. Fantastic result, if you're a German fan, obviously. But the conversation around that was more everyone getting involved, that global conversation, understanding the data there and making sure that you can do something with it to create a product which targets those people who have a different or a similar social graph to you. And then we go to some of the smaller moments. This is my son. It's breakfast, had pancakes, and it was my personal moment for me. So going back to the point, the slide earlier, what's important to you? So obviously my family, my little boy. And these are the things that are also part of the Twitter data that's out there. You can leverage this stuff. You can use all this data. Next slide. So what is the Twitter ecosystem? What does that actually mean? So I've talked about the data. And the data itself is one of those things that has unlimited value and limitless application. What does that actually mean? Well, it means all kinds of things. So I'm going to run through a few examples shortly about the kinds of things that people are using Twitter data for. But it does mean you can carve out something very specific for you as a startup focused on the Turkish market and beyond as a way for you to help drive and grow your business going forward. At the moment, I say at the moment, there's more than 500 companies in the ecosystem. And you can see in the background there's a few examples of some of the companies that are around, ranging from financial services through to broadcast curation, through to social media monitoring and analytics. And I cover all of EMEA, and I've barely scratched the surface, so I'd love to meet more companies in this part of the world who are using Twitter data in interesting ways to help drive the use of Twitter data to make better products. Here's an example, a company called Vigiglow, based out in France. They use Twitter data as a way to understand sentiment and mood and perception and gender breakdown when it comes to politics in this particular case. The French government, you know, there may be an election on. How can we understand what people are talking about? Is this the electorate? Is this what the important points that people are talking about now? It's become second nature for politicians and campaigns to start using Twitter data as a way to understand the electorate. But there aren't enough products out there that do this at a price point that makes sense to them. Here's another one, slightly more lighthearted. So this is sport. This is the French Open. A company called Floix. They're based out in Argentina. And what they do is create social hubs. That's the online piece that you can see there. But they also have products that do curation for broadcast products. So you'll see tweets on TV, you'll see tweets on big venue screens and so on. And these guys have a platform with moderation and all the clever functionality built in, which they then license to other people. So a lot of people come to me and say, I've got this amazing idea for Twitter, and this is what I'd like it to do. And it always comes out as being an agency model. And agency models are fine, if that's what you want to do. But I'm certainly really more interested in platform products and people who can license products and actually build from there and make things happen across multiple different verticals. Spreadfast, based out of the US, formerly known as Mass Relevance, recently just got acquired. And these guys are really interesting because the Brits 2014 is the UK equivalent of the Grammys, if you like. And it was the first time that a broadcast television Twitter vote had actually happened in the UK. So as well as being able to affect the new forms of media that there are a lot of traditional broadcasters out there who are still not quite sure how to handle social or how to handle Twitter data. How do we make that work? And it becomes apparent over time when you watch different TV shows, if it's like The X Factor or whatever it may be, that the pulse is actually on Twitter. The traditional SMS votes and so on, there's always a shock when someone gets thrown off, and it's always just come down to typically the conversation on Twitter said this, but the voting said something else. Style on screen, this is your retail therapy. You send a tweet with a particular hashtag around a particular show, and then someone will come back to you and say, hey, this is where you can buy it from. They struck partnerships with lots of retailers. So here we have French Connection, they've got Bloomingdale's, they have Selfridges, they have lots of other retailers who can actually monetize what people are tweeting about. Buy a product, you have a nice click-through, there's a bit of monetization there for you. You're targeting the right people on Twitter. And calendar reminders, this is a company based out in Australia. You send a tweet, and then you'll end up getting a link to download an entire set of calendar entries to your diary on your mobile phone. Works really well. We're seeing it a lot for things like various different TV shows or sporting events in this case. But again, it's another way to use the mechanic that's there to help drive the conversion from just being a passive viewer into someone who's engaged and you can understand what to do with them afterwards. So what do you do next? Well, I'm not going to stand up here and tell you this is what you should be doing. But the idea is you need to be in a position to focus on whether it's media, brands, consumer, or a business. Is this something that's going to go beyond 12 months? Is it going to be 18 months? How easily can you prototype and build something? And then the other one I always get, I need access to the fire hose. You probably don't. You probably just need a section of the fire hose to make sure that you can build something very quickly. Our publicly accessible APIs are very easy to get hold of. We've got two different types. We've got the streaming APIs, which give you an insight to what's happening right now. And you can build your own logic on top of that to build something really compelling for yourself. And then you also have the REST APIs, which give you detailed analytics data. You can go back into follow graphs. You understand social communities, what people are talking about in certain camps, and what people are not talking about in certain camps. Why did an event happen? These are the APIs that help make that happen. And of course, don't forget the basics. There's a lot of companies out there who don't have version 1 products for Twitter, but they excel at customer service. And they keep coming back, and they keep growing, and they keep getting better. And they iterate very, very quickly using these APIs that we have, and they build on it. Metrics are really important. If something failed, why did it fail? We need to understand the data behind this. I keep coming back to data. It's quite important. It's a pet project. Okay, I'm on it. 30, okay, I'm over. And frequently asked questions, this is where you go for any of the resources. If you want some examples of some companies, check out the media ecosystem side or the certified partners page, and that's pretty much it. So any other questions, let me know.